All right, welcome to New West number 5. My name is Gary Allen. I'm the COO of New Frontier Data, and I'll be the moderator of this particular panel, Brands and Advertising in the Cannabis Industry. And I'll wait. All right, cool. Again, my name is Gary Allen, COO of New Frontier Data. We have a very distinguished panel here for you this afternoon. Really, the conversation today is going to be around how to interact with this industry as a marketer, as a brand, as a publisher, and we're going to talk about the professionalism and shortening the learning curve of of ideation of a new product to launch. And so, I'm going to let each one of the panelists introduce themselves. Tell you a little bit about themselves, and then we're going to start. If you guys don't mind, I'm going to ask the audience real quick. How many people here currently operate in the cannabis industry? Okay, cool. How many have products in the cannabis industry? All right, we got a great audience. Any investors in the cannabis industry? Okay, remember all the people with products. They're going to need money soon. So you guys talk after we're done, okay? So let's have some fun. Dean, why don't we start with you?
Hey everybody, my name's Dean Waters. I'm the CEO of Flowertown. Up there it says I'm also the founder of a company called VIMBY. VIMBY's a unique content marketing company that I started 14 years ago. Still up and running in Burbank, California. I stepped out about 18 months ago to venture into cannabis. I was partners with Mark Burnett for 10 years with VIMBY, did a lot of really interesting things with a lot of big brands and working in very crowded markets. Started VIMBY last February, recruited a team of really interesting people that I've respected for a long time that have joined Flowertown that have just a slew of expertise on the consumer side. And we've currently, in February of this year, went consumer facing with a platform called VIMBY.com. Flowertown.com, which I'm not going to talk about VIMBY anymore from this point forward. But Flowertown.com, which is education, launching interesting product directories, recommendations that we see as good, legal, trusted products. We're starting a retail directory in the fourth quarter, all in an effort to curate experiences for the new consumer. We do feel that we're kind of relevant to the core consumer in ways that at Flowertown, all of our employees are fans of the plant. We understand the plant, we understand the benefits, but we also understand the challenges of the marketplace and things that we've done historically. We're a media and marketing company. We have a creative agency called FlowertownAgency.com, and we're doing really interesting work with brands currently. Have an interesting offering to the multi-state operator as we're locally based in over 80 markets because of VIMBY. And 6 regions internationally. We scale some very, very large brands, General Mills, Walgreens, Walmart, Samsung on the VIMBY side. We pride ourselves in sincerity marketing and being able to kind of scale content, very low cost, high quality across the country. And one of the biggest gaps we see as a marketer is storytelling. Everybody should be in the content business, but storytelling is important. Storytelling needs to deliver a message that's relevant, where you can build a relationship and enter that kind of single-page experience of a consumer talking about social media. And so we've spent years developing that directly with some of the largest social networks, and we're bringing that into cannabis. It's a marathon, it's not a sprint. We've pivoted along the way, but we're developing a brand of trust and safety on the consumer side. We're also helping brands on the agency side. We're curating vendors that we trust that can give brands access to the general market. While there's barriers to entry for consumer products, clearly because of the federal government, we're finding workarounds. Flowertown's educational or good housekeeping-ish. That's a tall mountain to climb, but we're using our voice in a unique way that's giving us more access, and we also think it's a really great filter for new consumers that don't want to be advertised to yet from cannabis products because of the stigma that exists that's real. So it's interesting that we're developing things and actually we're going to be releasing things in market through Flowertown on behalf of a brand because it's a safe entry point and we can help build relationships with consumers.
Okay, just really quick housekeeping. Safe word is penguin. Okay, so if I say penguin, move on.
Mine is cinnamon. I'm Derek Riedle. I am, I'm the publisher of Civilized. Is anybody familiar with Civilized? Thank you. Civilized is a digital media company that was founded in 2015 because I got pissed off with being in a cannabis closet. At that point, I was a 44-year-old father of 2 teenagers who really enjoyed cannabis and really didn't like alcohol that much, and got tired of living in a world that had the two contextualized wrong. So we began Civilized in 2015 to eliminate stigma and to elevate the tone of conversation around cannabis. Really, what we try to do is talk about cannabis like grown-ups, whether it's the written word that we're publishing every day or the web series that we are broadcasting every day. We really do try to connect with cannabis consumers and make them feel good about something that we think they can and should feel good about. That was our mission on day one, and that is our mission today.
Perfect, thank you.
Hi, my name is David Skul. I'm the chairman of Zefyr, Cannabis Data. We specialize in consumer data, especially around cannabis consumers. So I've spent 22 plus years in the marketing and advertising world on the traditional side, and now have brought that kind of direct marketing focus, direct data type of application into this space about 3 years ago. So now it's finally time, apparently. So here I am.
Hi, my name is Peter Vogel. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Leafwire. And for those of you who are members, and I hope there's some Leafwire members out there, give a holler.
That's right.
We are the largest cannabis business network in the world. We have about 21,000 members right now and growing quickly. And we are adding a job board in about 2 weeks. So our angle is a little bit different than most others. Our angle is a little bit different. I think it's mine. What's yours?
Penguin.
Yeah.
Penguin.
Wow. Well, let me just finish that last point. I know. So my angles, our view is probably a little bit different than most of these guys because we promote Leafwire to try and get business people to join, not consumers, and we're also promoting brands who want to reach cannabis business people as well on our platform. So everything we do doesn't really revolve around consumers at all. So we're a little bit of a different view than probably most of the rest of the people on the panel.
Correct, but you are a publisher, right? And so one of the most important things that we're going to talk about is responsible publishing and responsible distribution. So thanks, Peter.
Is this working? Great. Hi, I'm Jake Litke. I'm the CEO of Mediajel. We are a digital marketing agency. We focus on compliance and location. Unlike Peter, we are very focused on consumers. We help brands find the right consumers for their message. And that's it. I'll keep it short so we can get into a discussion.
Great. Thank you, gentlemen. And so listen, we really have decided that the panel should just be a discussion. So I have some questions here. We're going to kind of open the discussion up. There is a microphone back there. There is a question and answer time, I guess, in about 30 minutes or 25 minutes. I would, if you guys don't mind, if somebody has a pressing question based on the topic that we're talking about, please feel free, jump up there. And if you don't want to use the microphone, tell me your question and I'll ask the panel. But we really would like this to be interactive, which is why I asked who was in the audience. So really quickly, I'll open it up to the entire panel. You know, the question is, is marketing in cannabis, or is marketing cannabis, is this a different market? Is this a different advertising challenge than any other market in the world?
Yes.
Okay, we rehearsed this, guys.
Okay, no. It is different. I mean, it's different for a lot of reasons. You have the compliancy issue alone is a major issue. I have a picture which I can show at some point. It's a picture of every regulation that exists in every single state for advertising in cannabis. That alone creates a huge barrier to entry because you have to know exactly who you're serving ads to, right? So in California, you have to have 71.6% of your audience over 21, right? In Colorado, it's 30%. It's different in every state, and that creates a huge amount of issues. And that's one of the things that we help bring to brands is that we take care of that part for them, right? That's just a barrier, right? Now you have to get into the actual marketing after that.
Right. When we talk about marketing in that space, it's kind of interesting to think about a product as versatile as cannabis. And not only because it takes so many different forms, but because the audiences are so varied. The reasons why, the understanding of the product, how they engage with the product is all so very different. We can't just look at it like this is product X being sold to consumer Y.
Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so our point of view is a little bit different because we tend to deal with a lot more ancillary companies who are promoting products that don't touch the plant. Right. So in our world, a lot of the advertising principles, marketing rules, et cetera, are kind of all the same. That, messaging still needs to be, good solid messaging. You still need repetition. You still need professionally produced artwork and graphics and emails and things like that. And one thing we've found kind of across a lot of companies is that a lot of cannabis brands tend to be very cheap, and they don't want to spend, $100 or $200 or $500, and they kind of somehow feel, because they're advertising cannabis, like it shouldn't cost the same, it should be cheaper or easier. And the reality is, if you want to go out and spend $100 on something, you're not going to get a big response from it. So in that sense, there isn't much of a difference in terms of building a brand and repetition.
So it's a big surprise, I'm sure, to the 150 years worth of experience up here that marketers are cheap, right? It can't be a big surprise, but I completely agree. So let me ask you this real quick. So the first two things out of the gate were regulatory compliance is a barrier to entry, right? And you know what? If you don't spend money, you're not going to get anything back. Does that make our industry different than any other industry? Yes is the answer. So, what I meant to ask is that not usually where the conversation stops with the regulation, right? With the mature marketers in the world, why are they staying away from us? Why are mature companies staying away from the cannabis industry? Why are mature product companies, CPG companies, staying away from the cannabis industry?
Well, I mean, I don't think we can't underestimate the damage that's been done to the underlying promise of cannabis. It's been on the naughty list for generations and generations. Thankfully, the brand of cannabis is starting to change, and it will change, continue to change and evolve. But it's because it's when people are cheap. They think industry is new, nascent, can't be trusted. It's not always the most large companies, established brands. People tend to trust them more. So where they don't have these massive institutions within cannabis, whether you're a media company in cannabis, whether you're a retailer, whether you're a producer, people look for legacy and trust and scale, and there's just not a lot of that right now, too.
But even though this is federally prohibited, there are other regulated industries that have overcome, alcohol, tobacco, porn, right? I mean, there are other industries that have overcome kind of this haze, right? This gray haze. So, Dean, actually, what's the difference between a cannabis, or should there be a difference between a cannabis brand and any other type of brand building exercise?
We got the big federal government, right? Things are still Schedule 1, so any publicly traded companies are, really not entering the space. There's a massive stigma, that the state of California legalized cannabis and nobody's talking to anybody. There's no education. They released a fund of $1.7 million, #WeedWise, and that, budget might do okay in Fresno, California, right? It's just, so I think it's upon the industry to educate, come together and create a form for that. But, in many ways, there's a lot of best practices that we embrace for consumer markets, but there also is some of these barriers of traditional means that you just can't go down that path. So it's, I think the federal government plays a huge part, Gary, as to why a lot of mainstream players have Constellation brands entering Canada, right? Not domestically, there's hesitation.
Okay, and obviously that is the. But what are the less obvious answers, right? We know that it's federally illegal, and everybody's known that for 100 years. But there are companies coming into the industry, right? There are regulations that will allow companies to come into the industry. How do we open up this market in such a way that they'll trust us, that we bring real true marketing and advertising and consumer engagement to these companies, right? This is an ingredient, right? We all, CBD, THC, they're ingredients in a product. So for the brand people the brand people on the panel, how do we get the marketer or the product maker, the CPG company, and the consumer together?
I would say that the industry itself needs to make the leap to national brands in order for that to happen, right?
What does that mean?
That means that you can run a television ad across the country in every market and have that not be wasted money, or at least choose a majority of the states, right? Real CPG marketing requires that, and I would say today there's not a real national brand, consumer brand in cannabis. There's some that are getting there, but if you go on the street in New York and ask someone to name 3 brands, and ask someone in California to do the same thing, they'll either name 3 different brands, or they won't be able to name 3 at all, right? So we need to get to a place where we're there, and that's going to take large budgets and a lot of marketing companies, and a lot of companies like ours, and like the other companies here. There's lots of room. I mean, there's a lot of work to do.
And when I think about the ecosystem for cannabis globally, we've got this great experiment that Canada has started. I'm a Canadian, and we're almost a year into it, just shy of a year, and it hasn't been smooth. There's been a lot of hiccups. There's been supply issues. There have been, the value of the companies that are trading in Canada is causing issue with access to capital here. Plus, the restrictions on branding and advertising in Canada are nothing short of draconian. And so prior to those being released, I was really excited for Canada to be a symbol of tolerance, legalization, and to be an example globally of how legalization can roll out. But if there's one thing I can't stand that the Canadian government did, was they have restricted communications for cannabis companies to, they basically treat it like cigarettes. They treat it like tobacco. They don't treat it like alcohol, so you can't picture the product. You can't, you can't do anything with cigarettes. You can't do anything with cannabis in Canada. And to me, that just keeps it further on that keeps it on the naughty list. And to me, it needs to be more conversations with people in Canada, with people in the United States, who are using it as a healthy part of their balanced lifestyle and talking about it. People want to see themselves represented in cannabis culture. So to me, it's about companies having the freedom to be able to communicate properly, but it's also about us as a group of people who enjoy something. We've got to get over our own stigma, and those who can safely self-identify need to start communicating about the cannabis closet and their love for cannabis.
I think the question of trust comes from the businesses that exist now, right? What does it take for an existing cannabis business to trust an agency? It's the same thing that it takes for any business to trust an agency or an advertising outlet or a marketer, right? You have to know that the person that you're dealing with has experience and skill and understanding. Number 2, you've got to understand that those people are going to spend your money correctly. And number 3, that those people are going to easily be able to identify the results for you. You're going to see it either as an uptick in sales, an uptick in interest, or whatever the goals may be to lay out. The real trust is real simple, right? It's all about results. And when you're throwing down 10 grand, 15 grand into a Weed Maps app or a Leafly app or any advertising venue that mocks up an advertisement for you for free or for a low price, you've got to understand that trust is not going to be easily gained that way.
Go ahead, Drew.
Yeah, I was just going to add one more thing. In addition to the trust, I think it's also a level of professionalism. And so we buy advertising from a variety of websites, email newsletters, kind of across the cannabis spectrum. And we found that there's very little consistent reporting back on impressions, click-throughs, results. et cetera. And I know, so for example, like a company like Mediajel, I know from the work we've done with them, like they do a great job tracking results across different formats, different browsers, different locations, et cetera, providing all that data in a very professional way. But that's an exception, I think, in the kind of the universe. You don't see that, and I think you need that to bring in the bigger CPG, more professional companies into the industry.
I think that's a really good point. And as we talked about earlier, building trust and making sure that the product owners and the product creators and marketers trust the service providers is really important. It's really difficult. I'm wondering if we don't want to kind of bring this down kind of right to ground level, right? We saw about 80% of the audience here operates in the industry, and about 2/3 of them have products in the industry. So if you guys are okay with it, if we can, let me ask a question. How many people that do have products in the, or how many people currently try to advertise cannabis products in the industry? So look at that. So about 80% of you raised your hands that you operate in the industry, and about, again, 80% of those said you have products in the industry, and most people don't advertise. So I'm going to ask a real quick question of the whole audience. Somebody just blurt out an answer. Why not? Right. That's exactly right. So
it's all biggest bang for your buck.
Right. So the marketing dollars are not allowed to be cost of goods sold, right? Right. But marketing dollars are not allowed to be cost of goods sold. So if the operator does have a product and they do want to advertise, they don't have a real budget that they can work with, or I think more probably accurately, they don't really trust that their marketing dollar is going to actually do anything for them. What can they do? Let's bring it from the federal level all the way down to the operator level. So what's some advice on brand, on distribution, on engagement? So what's some advice you can give to current market operators that need to get their message out into the industry?
If you guys don't mind, I'll start with Discover. How's that sound?
Yeah.
Okay, guys, so here's the thing. There's a lot of marijuana products, and it's getting bigger and faster every single day. And there's only so many things that have been done so far. Yeah, they're becoming technologically advanced. We've got multiple devices, we've got multiple products, we've got multiple offerings. But if you look at them, they're all kind of coming back to the same thing, right? Over and over and over again, just in different forms. So you have audiences that are there, but may or may not be ready to receive you because of stigma, or because of lack of knowledge, or because of lack of awareness even. So you have to first understand, where are these people? Who are they? And what do they want from you? Because not everybody wants to smoke a blunt. Not everybody wants to eat a brownie. Not everybody wants to eat a gummy edible. Not everybody wants to take a dab. It's just not, that's not the way it is. And the days of it'll sell itself are ending rapidly. You've got a few more years in that space.
And why is that?
Because it's no longer a novelty, guys. Guess what? You're not as naughty anymore as you used to be. All right? Everybody goes, oh, that's great. Well, sometimes it's good to be the devil, all right? Especially when it comes to sales and when it comes to vice and things like this. It's nice to be a naughty thing. But guess what? Moms are starting to look at you. Moms, okay? You're not naughty anymore. So it's not going to sell the same way. And so we.
The way you say that is quite naughty. I just wanted to.
Well, what can I say?
To your point, Dave, it's time to start building brands. Certainly, commoditization's happening. There's thousands of brands. I think one of the few panels ago, there's 32,000 brands, cannabis brands, are emerging. And if you look at some of these retail stores, there's very little shelf space, right? A group that I know out of Illinois, we're part of the team that were able to work with the state to pass cannabis recreational in Illinois. Massive success in 6 weeks. The one thing that didn't happen is everybody that opted in, nobody shared what the perspective was. Everybody's in the closet about cannabis. So for people to think like, I'm going to impress a consumer, they're going to scream my name from the tallest mountain, and they're going to promote my product, guess what? They might share with their friends, and a lot of those friends that they're sharing with still aren't ready to walk into a dispensary. to make a purchase, and that's, you know, what we're seeing in California, 71% plus are, you know, people that have not walked into a dispensary. You know, for us as marketers, we've adjusted our hat to, you know, adjust budgets to work with brands, because it is a whole new frontier. There are entry points, but it does cost money, right? And, you know, but, you know, our perspective is about building brands and getting down to some just general market tactics and best practices of consumer brands. And there is a lot of thinking that's just not happening that is important for the cannabis industry.
I want to echo what he said about brands. I think that, you know, a lot of times when we talk to brands that are new and we ask them who their customers, and they say everyone. We want to get everyone, and that's not a very good answer. I think you either need to find who your consumer is going to be and build a product for them, or build a product and find who the consumer is that wants that product. And when you have a lot of noise, you're going to have a lot more success if you have a very targeted approach to a specific set of people.
So speaking of that, speaking of a very targeted approach, understanding who the consumers are, what they want, building a brand. So David, off the top of your head, we didn't ask this before, but with the Dash platform, we've quoted a number between 27 million and 51 million consumers, 27 million of age in the United States, 51 million total throughout kind of Mexico all the way up to Canada. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Okay. How do these, so how, there are 51 million consumers out there. How does an operator sitting in this room right now who has one pre-roll product or two pre-roll products or one dispensary or two dispensaries, how do they discover that consumer for them? Like, how do they discover where their consumers are, who they are, and how they should engage with them?
So, you know, the first thing that you always consider with the consumer is economics, right? You got to look at where you're at. Where are you at, and where's your consumer? Do you even get close to meeting one another? If you've got a very high-priced pre-roll and you're in a low-end neighborhood as a dispensary, or if you've got high-priced products and you're in a medium-income place, how do you incite buying? You have to very clearly identify who that consumer is. 51 million potential consumers and growing. It's growing daily. It's getting bigger and bigger. The more the reach, the more the communication that happens, right? The more the people want to engage. So you've got a situation now where you've got to understand that as different as you all are in this room, so are all of them. And you have to decide very early on in your branding work and your messaging, who is my target? And like I said, economics, location, and desire. How are you going to meet those three things?
Yeah, that was great. Peter, so as you said, you're different, right? Because your distribution channel is B2B, right? Ancillary. But is there a consumer play for Leafwire, right? If you're selling advertising, you're selling a distribution and engagement, right? We know that there are 51 million consumers. However, 21,000 of them who own businesses who are in the industry have signed up, right, for your service, and a percentage of them are buying advertising. How are you engaging with those customers? Is it pure B2B? I mean, do you have any consumer brands that have come to you?
Yeah, we actually have worked with some consumer brands, and I think everyone, you know, it's not really hard to make this leap that, you know, every business is actually owned by a person, so that person is a consumer. So, and in the cannabis industry, the majority of people that work in the cannabis industry are most likely, almost everyone I've met is probably a consumer of cannabis, or they probably wouldn't want to work in the industry. So the reality is every B is also a C. So yes, I mean, we have a pool of 21,000 consumers who all also happen to be cannabis business people or business owners, but they are consumers just the same. And I mean, we found the way to communicate with them is just consistent information and trying to provide useful things about news and events and educational things that they find interesting rather than trying to sell to them. So it's building the kind of the relationship over time with information. That's
awesome. So earlier today on the main stage, I announced the next frontier idea, right? This market entry supply chain, right? And everybody on this panel represents some version, some input or output of that supply chain. So, Gene, starting with you and branding, why don't we can we kind of give a brand creation scenario for the operators out there, big or small? Like what is the ideation all the way to delivery?
Man, that's
Oh, come on, you guys can do it one sentence
That'll be
apiece. It's easy.
$50,000. Right?
It's got to start with education, right? Where, I'm a big believer right now, and we're working with a large brand in California, and they're going to be launching an educational campaign as marketing, right? Because there's room for it, right? I mean, the consumer wants to be spoken to. And so most brands are in the dispensary, right? And it's
So when you say education, is that a marketing term or is it an academic term, right? Are you just saying content marketing that educates what they are, who they are, and where they are?
I'm saying marketing assets that are education,
Perfect.
right? Like an FAQ campaign, right?
Absolutely.
That's cleverly done, that can be done across every single platform, social media, versioning differently based on that experience, but something that's clever, it's scalable, it's repeatable based on local markets with an infusion of local and things that are really important, right? I mean, it's everybody's forgetting that there's the biggest opportunity for everybody in this room on the rec side is that new consumer, right? The core consumer is always going to be there. The new consumer, there's billions waiting in the wings. How do you get them to move? And
Perfect.
I think there's brands that are doing really interesting things based on feeling-based products. I think it's early days. I think there's a lot of fine-tuning. It'll get better, but it's a way for new consumers to digest. But I think it's got to start with education.
So I'm gonna jump around real quick. So Dean, that was exactly what we were looking for. That's perfect. So David, as Dean said, they've come up with an idea. The brand has an idea. We want to educate about our brand. We want to do an FAQ. What do they do next?
You got to find out the questions, right?
And the consumers,
And
right?
the consumers, yeah. So who are the consumers you're looking at? And if they're asking certain questions, not everybody asks the same questions. Young people ask different questions than older people do. Affluent people ask different questions than middle-income people do. Latinos ask different questions than black people do. It's the truth. We're all culturally very different in this great country of ours. Thank God for that. And so you've got to discover the questions of that consumer. So it's pretty easy to find out what people want to know. If you look at a young person or a person who's looking to maybe enter the space with a product, their first concern is, what's it going to do to me? What's going to happen? Am I going to get in trouble? Is it going to hurt me? Right? And then you've got the middle-aged guy who's like, how good is it going to be? Right? How good can it be?
How long is it gonna last?
Exactly. How good is it going to be? And then you've got the elder community coming in now saying, how can it help me? Right? How can I be helped? How can I be healed even? So just looking at just some very, very clear demographics, you can quickly discover the questions.
So
And just real quick to your point, it's the campaign's 35 to 54, right? So it's not 21 plus because
No, that's a whopper.
the younger segment wouldn't gravitate towards this approach.
Right.
But the segment we're focusing is aspirational to younger people, and they're also catering to their aging up parents.
Sure.
Right. So, exactly, you got to define a segment.
It's about finding that, and then you're doing it right by finding the connection between the elder and the older with the bridge group at 35 to 44, right? So that does work that way. 35 or 34 to 54 is always this weird group, right? It's the big fat one right in the middle where they're kind of starting to earn at the bottom and really earning at the end, right? So you've got this weird
Here's
dichotomy.
hoping.
Yeah, well, at least it used to be that way in the United States anyway, but, sorry, didn't mean to be that way. But the reality is that, yes, if you do bridge it with the 35 to 44, you can bring that young user up to speed with their parent.
So how do you find them, right? So now if you can do social campaigns if you're creating original content, but you can't do paid social, right? Because that's still blocked on Facebook and Instagram. You have 2/3 of all the marketing right now on the digital side goes to Facebook and Google, right? Which are off limits still at this time. Right. So you have to figure out ways to find this because Facebook is pretty good about now knowing how old people are, but then you start to fall back on relying on these third-party data sources like Experian or companies like that, and at the household level, there's quite a bit of noise in there. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. At the household level, there's always noise. So even Nielsen hasn't figured out that noise.
Right. So we understand we need to do an education campaign. We understand that we need to find the consumers that we have. We need to understand where to go and engage those consumers, right? And then Derek, once we know what we're doing, how do we build that? How do we build that influencer network? What is it we need to do out there? What do they need to do out there to help their sales and help their brands grow?
Well, first and foremost, I want to talk about the education part of it. And part of figuring out what people want to know can be really simple tactically in your own markets. Just check what people are searching for. Like, use Google. Like, we create short form educational videos called Cannabis for Beginners and CBD for Beginners. They're little 2-minute things, and they are all based on what people are searching for. Yeah, exactly. But look, what we're doing at Civilized is building an eyeball, an attention trap that we share with others in the industry. And we're trying to break down barriers and break down stigma. So for us, we think we're that first wave of type of connection for a cannabis consumer, because we've got the gravitas and we're OGs almost in the cannabis industry.
You are.
I'm shaving the beard tomorrow. 4 years old, so there's some credibility, there's some heritage, and there's some legacy that comes with it, and it is just about hijacking that as customers.
Perfect. So listen, we've got, I don't know, about 7 minutes left, 5 to 7 minutes left. Are there questions from the audience? If you guys don't mind, jump on that mic.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. I totally am in agreement about brands functionally having to be able to answer core questions about what the brands are. And you touched upon it, obviously understanding your audience. You kind of alluded to this, and this is one of the problems that we're seeing. We have a bunch of liquor clients where we're expanding into cannabis. All of our advertising for liquor clients is targeted on Facebook and Google, because we can target geos, we can target demos, we can target interest-based stuff. So functionally, even if you have content, one of the challenges that we're seeing is there's just a lack of distribution channels, right? So it's, do you pay an influencer to potentially promote it? But the scale piece is one of the things that I think is fundamentally missing, given the issues around not being able to be on these networks. So what are some of the practical things? Some of the things that we've seen are brands actually creating CBD brands first, building a brand, and then having that dovetail into a product that has THC. But outside of that, what other distribution channels are you guys seeing that are even effective at all?
So for us, I think it's looking at social differently than what a lot of people are doing. I think there's different tactics. Some of the things that we're doing is we're trying to figure out synthetic relationships with traditional marketing companies. So we're talking to a really large events company that has venues all over the country, and from my past life of being in traditional marketing, and tapping into their theater goer database, right? Tapping into databases to fill venues, but purely consumer events, right? And with those consumer events comes content, comes marketing tools, bringing in non-endemic brands into those events, because we believe there's a cannabis lifestyle that circles around. I think any of us that partake, if you partake with somebody, you just become friends. It's this weird thing that just happens. And so we're looking at some traditional means that are large and scalable and create, touch points to reach new consumers. But we're also, a large broadcaster that I've known forever is like, Dean, we can't have our head in the sand. We've got 25 million homes. Let's do something. I can't take advertising, but I trust you with your storytelling, and let's do something. So we're trying to figure out ways through Flower Town to integrate products into a lot of what I learned from Mark Burnett for 10 years and building relationships, sincerity, marketing, authenticity, all that stuff, to find traditional ways in through a different voice. But there certainly, there are those barriers with social media, with Instagram and Facebook. We're finding some gray areas. We partner with Open Influence, which is a large influencer network. We use Flower Town as a storytelling mechanism between the influencer and the follower, because they're not pushing transactions, they're pushing education. We kind of capitalized on this area that, we're pushing that consumer funnel further down the pathway, that we're having huge success with that, but it's a $30,000 entry point for a campaign, which is expensive, right? So, and it's hard to measure the ROI of transactions for THC-based products at the dispensary, but the brand awareness, brand affinity is huge, and the click-throughs from our stories to A cannabis page is like in the 80 percentile, which is massive, but we can't track transactions.
Won't technology help this question? I mean, won't technology help you curate and?
Yeah, I mean, it's a combination of technology and then relationships. So we focus on trying to do mainstream advertising for cannabis brands. So rather than pursue the sort of endemic cannabis audience, we feel that on the CPG side, there's a larger potential audience of cannabis consumers in the future than there are today. And so with that thesis, what we've done is spent the time to build relationships with companies like Gannett and other sell-side platforms. So we actually do have digital reach. Now, influencer marketing, that's your guy there for sure. We don't do that, but we can put your ad on USA Today right now.
The other thing that I don't know if anybody else knows here, but XM is not federally regulated.
That's right.
Neither is OTT.
Yeah, so it's all happening, right? So that's happening now. You're hearing MedMen advertise on Stern.
Yeah.
Okay, the reach is happening, and it will happen regardless of the situation. And you got to think about reach in a bunch of different ways, right? You're not just reaching through a channel; you're reaching with a message.
And we're curating vendors, OTT, programmatic that have traditional means, but it's about building ad units that are more compliant than what's been typical. It's wording, it's images, it's a lot. So we're.
Do you have another question?
It's more about, I think it's interesting for Derek and Dean, because I think the challenge that all of you are going to have building brands is that advertising is kind of dying, and you can't build brands and buy 336 by 280 banners. So how are you helping brands?
That's a hell of a statement.
You know, actually become publishers and become storytellers, because they have to have that, because there is no other vehicle. They can't go to TV, they can't go. So are you working with Vice? Are you working with, you know, some of these publishers that are unique that can potentially drive more eyeballs?
At this point, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Derek, because you just asked him the three main questions of Civilized, and he's going to need a couple minutes.
Yeah, no, look, we're working with all kinds of partners. We're represented by William Morris Endeavor, so we're into that family. Look, these, to me, it's almost a platitude now, but storytelling is the way to do it. Whether you're creating your own or you're finding somebody else's to sponsor and to hold on to, that is what is really driving things now. People are looking for more authenticity than we have in any point in this sort of media savvy society in which we live. So they're looking for people that are telling stories that they feel are real, that they feel are connecting with them, and that they're left wanting more. And that residual bit is what I call brand love, and that's what you're all striving for.
Another question?
Earlier in your talk, you talked about regulations that limit the advertising of cannabis brands. Does that only apply to THC brands, or does it apply to THC-free cannabis brands as well?
It applies to both in different ways, right? So you have individual state regulations for THC products. They're pretty strict. You've got different regulations in Canada. Interestingly, one of the ad exchanges we work with is the Index Exchange. They're Canadian-based, so I thought that was going to be great. Turns out, no, their advertising rules are stricter. So even though we're running ads through a Canadian company in California, we still have to adhere to their creative guidelines, which is basically a white screen with some black text on it. CBD has a different set of things. With the Farm Bill, now that it's descheduled, states are allowed to do their own laws. So there's 4 states now that have outlawed CBD entirely because they're allowed to do that. So it's just a chaotic landscape.
And this is another one of those things where technology is going to give us that security and trust over the short term until, and it'll continue to evolve, but it's going to be the only way to stay compliant and know that you are. Any other questions from the audience? You got, good.
So I visited my son in college, and he said, as far as we're concerned, the brands are all the same, and it's just a question of how high you're getting. And I've thought about that comment many times, because I'm wondering if the plan is going to give us so many different kinds of high experiences that's where the next wave of branding is going to take place.
I'd say that's your Keystone Ice and Natty Light audience, right? It's college. Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing as people do buy.
Repeat the question, please. Repeat the question.
Sure. The question was, let me see if I can paraphrase that. But Barry, you here.
So in visiting my son in college recently, he said that it's just a question of how high you get with the weed, and I was looking at 10 of his friends, and I said, what are the most popular brands? And none of them really had an answer. So I thought, okay, is this plant going to evolve in a way with the consumer from a branding standpoint that really what you're branding and marketing is the experience of how you're getting high? Because that's not happening right now.
But I think for them it's about how much money can they spend, right? So where brands don't matter if I can get a bigger bag and it smells good and looks good, and I'll probably finish the bag. But
Well,
it.
I'll tell you, this is USC, and none of these kids have that problem.
Well, I think with just like with every other consumer packaged good, right? I think that if results driven consumerism is going to be kind of our normal at some point, right? And the idea I remember when I first got in the industry, the idea was, marijuana was going to be like wine, right? We're gonna find the different strains, and they're going to be it's going to be very boutique, very curated. And what we're finding with the big CPG companies coming in is like, listen, if we can normalize and commoditize, right, and affect a taste, a result, then we're going to do that, and we're going to mass market it. And so eventually that's going to happen, I'm sure. Well, we're out of time. Oh, go ahead, one more question.
One last question, since you guys are all in publishing, we're talking about storytelling. And you had mentioned, Derek, previously about Google Trends and what you've been up to and what you've been seeing.
I'm sorry, about what?
About Google Trends and
Yeah,
what you've been seeing
yeah.
from customers and
Yeah,
engagement.
yeah.
Could you let everyone know, because as we're talking about brands, we're talking about how we're going to tell the stories. Are there new stories to be told beyond the 1.0 cannabis?
Yeah.
For this, I guess, new customer, if you will?
Derek, we've got make it short. We got a little bit of time.
Certainly. Yeah, there are. And that's, when we first started in this, cannabis seemed like something that, might have a finite number of stories, but, we've pretty successfully stayed away from being too much of a business publication and not even really being a cannabis publication. We go at it from a people first perspective. So we're not about cannabis, we're about people who enjoy cannabis. And once you get that angle, there can be endless types of stories. So I think there are endless types of stories, especially for brands, because you've got to architect out so many different brand promises. Like there's a brand promise for the college student, and there's a brand promise for the retired elderly couple, and there's a brand promise for me. So yeah, I think those stories are there, and I think creativity is limitless.
All right, everybody. We're going to thank you guys. Thank the panelists for their time today. Guys, great job. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for participating.